Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present. My name is Ethan Rouen. I'm a professor in the Accounting and Management Unit at Harvard Business School, and I'm also the faculty co-chair of the Impact Weighted Accounts Project. And today I'll be talking about joint work with my colleague at Impact Weighted Accounts, Ryan Dalton, as well as our colleague Zoe Bulger, who is at Summa Equity. And what we're doing in this project is examining how and why we should measure product and services impact. And we're particularly looking at the financial technology industry and the impact its products can have on consumers and more broadly stakeholders. We focus on the financial technology space for two reasons. First, because they're fairly uniform projects or products, and so they're easy to measure. And second, because there's a lot of interest from impact investors in this space. So there's a desire for this information. But before I go into the nitty-gritty of how we do this, I'm going to give you a broad overview of impact-weighted accounts and dive into the measurement that I'm talking about today. So our mission at Impact-Weighted Accounts is to advance financial accounts that reflect the company's social, economic, and environmental performance. And our theory of change is fourfold. First, we think that impact can be measured, valued, and compared across companies. We also think that public reporting of impact is necessary for an economy that optimizes risk, return, and impact. We also believe that this type of measurement system can be cost-effective, scalable, and actionable, and it can produce valuable decision-relevant data for investors, managers, and policymakers. Now, we've been doing this at Impact-Weighted Accounts for 4 years or so. We started by designing this methodology, and then we did numerous test cases working on research and corporate testing, and then getting feedback from those tests, as well as consulting with experts while revising our methodology, which has led us to this point where we have a fairly robust but also flexible methodology that examines impact across three main pillars. First, there's employment, or the impact of organizations on employees in the local labor community. Then there's the impact from organizations' operations on the environment. And lastly, what I'll be talking about today is impact on consumers and nature from the use of products and services. Now, how we envision impact-weighted accounts being used is as supplemental line items on financial disclosures that reconstitute corporate performance to take into account social, environmental, as well as economic results. And so you can see from this simple or fairly simple income statement that a company can report its revenues and expenses, and then below that, report the positive and negative impacts it has across the three pillars. And that will allow companies to report both their net income as well as their impact-adjusted net income. And what this will allow companies to do by standardizing this in dollar values, we can plot company performance along two dimensions. There's traditional return to financial stakeholders along the y-axis, and then along the x-axis, we can see values to non-financial stakeholders. And so here, this would allow markets to penalize companies like Business A, strictly rent-seeking companies, by increasing cost of capital, while also analyzing the trade-offs that businesses B and C make between returns to financial stakeholders and value to non-financial stakeholders. Now, turning to product impact, we think about product impact along three dimensions. There is the product impact to stakeholders, capital, and then we look at product impact across the value chain. And for corporations to use measurement as a proactive tool, they must identify and measure material social issues that inform strategy and are associated with increases in enterprise values and sales. And this product and service impact will allow them to transform clients and customers into stakeholders and build foundational knowledge of customer value proposition.
Question is, how feasible is it for companies to do a product impact analysis?
Now, we often get this question about how feasible it is for companies to do a product impact analysis. And this actually flows nicely into what I'm about to talk about next, because while the actual product impact analysis does take some people power, it takes investing in collecting the data, thinking about how to do it, the methodology is actually already there. So it's not that challenging, it just takes a little time. And so when we think about how a company or an organization can create a path to pioneering impact strategy for product impact, we think of it along 5 steps. First, it's about parsing specific impact goals that are aligned with the revenue model. Then it's about experimenting with approaches to quantifying social impact, such as the methodology we developed at IWA, which I'll go into in a moment. Then once they have this methodology, they can champion standards for industry-specific metrics while also embracing interim metrics and on a path to outcomes. And once this is established, it's about creating flexible systems, acknowledging that these will evolve, that across time, products change, and across companies, products change. And so having a methodology that can align with a single company while also being able to bend a bit to apply to others is very important. Turning to product impact analysis in the financial technology space, we think we've looked in this project at the first three steps. First, it's about parsing impact goals and embracing interim metrics. Here, our first goal is financial inclusion, which is about affordability, number of outreach partners, and the outcome measure here would be percentage of customers from underserved groups. The second goal would be financial health, or the percentage of transactions used to weather financial crises. Here, an outcome would be the percentage of customers whose resources stabilize after those financial crises. And lastly, there's cybersecurity. So digital stewardship, security and privacy protocols. We can think of this as the percentage of successful data breaches or scaled by the total number of attacks. The second step, experimenting with quantifying impact. I'll go into detail here because we actually analyzed two companies, PayPal and Shopify, and I'll show you how different and how meaningfully the impact across two very similar firms can vary.
Ethan, may I interrupt again for a moment? Who is the audience for product impact analysis?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I'm about to get to, the audience for product impact analysis, because it is a broad audience. You can think of this as an audience for managers, an audience for investors, and for regulators. But when firms choose to lead and in developing these product impact analyses, there can be several advantages. First, it allows them to shape and align customer value propositions, go-to-market strategies, and product design by developing domain knowledge of how and for whom core products generate impact. And this allows them to communicate also with investors and regulators. Second, as I said, it communicates the value creation here. This is what these investors often care about. And so this in turn helps them to win in a competitive and crowded market. And lastly, it establishes accountability among stakeholders to mitigate risk. Now, how we in our project analyzed impact, we think of it in a framework that's very similar to our general impact weighted accounts framework. We start with reach. Basically, is it available to customers and is it affordable? Specifically in fintech, it's about looking at transaction volume and the differences in average firm versus industry's fees per transaction. Then we look at two different stakeholders. We start with the client or the customer, and we break this down into three buckets. It's underserved, social value of inclusion for underserved groups. Then it's quality measured as transaction loss and authorization rates. And lastly, it's about consumer protection violations, optionality. So the third big pillar is the environment. Now, this is particularly important in industries such as automotive, where you can think about the use phase as contributing to the environmental footprint of the product, as well as the recyclability at the end of life. In fintech, it's a little bit smaller, and it's large, or I should say a lot smaller, and it's largely driven by the social cost of capital of carbon emissions per transaction. Now, turning to our actual analysis, I hope you can see two benefits in this kind of analysis. So again, we look at PayPal and Shopify, and we find very different stories. PayPal has significant positive product impact driven largely by reach. So you can see that by disaggregating product impact into different categories, you can see what's driving it. Here, PayPal, it's largely about that it's readily available to the customers who need it. With secondary, it's about access. They're good at reaching underserved communities. The second benefit here is that by attaching a dollar value to it, we can make it comparable across companies, because PayPal is a much larger company than Shopify. And so by scaling it by revenues, we can see that the impact per dollar of revenue is also much higher at PayPal. It's not just driven by the size of the company, it's actually driven by its commitment to reach. We studied fintech for three big reasons here, and it's a starting point. First, or four big reasons. First, it's actually fairly, as I said, easy to analyze, but it's also one of the fastest growing industries with a collective global market valuation of $5 trillion. And much of this growth has been delivered due to the promise of impact at scale. Fintech has pitched itself as an industry that can create greater financial inclusion while also increasing the security of transactions. And it's already a favored a darling of the impact investing community. Of all the industries, fintech gets more impact-related dollars of investments than any other industry. It already has about $250 billion in assets under management. Now, 5 of the largest fintech companies explicitly state in their mission statements that they are about creating positive impact through their products and services. And yet we bumped up against frustration here because we tried to collect data for 7 companies. Only 2 of these companies, PayPal and Shopify, had the sufficient data to do this kinds of analysis. So there were 5 others who also explicitly talk about financial inclusion and impact in their communications with investors, and yet none of them provided sufficient data to do this analysis. And so you can start to see that while the methodology is there, we still have a big step in implementation. And that's where we're really pushing companies. And that's what we hope will be the next big step, because investors clearly need this information. It's just about companies delivering it to make this successful. Thank you so much.